It's looking it up. There we go.
Yep, that's
Yay.
definitely live on a delay.
We are live. And in a weird, delay.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Oh, no, too many computers to manage. All right, let's get that out of the way.
How many screens?
Hi, everybody.
Ew.
I think we somehow ended up moving something because our screen is... You cut off Avernus.
What?
Look.
I'm also cutting off the top of my head.
You're breaking up the world.
Oh, God.
Hi, everybody. Yes, those who noticed, it's been a little late start. It's been an interesting morning. First of all, sound test, as always, because one of our biggest problems is we weren't getting any sound at first.
Wait. Got it.
Can you? Yeah. I think actually, Mike Kale created that as a way. Sound is great. Thank you, Lord Willow. So yes, this morning we changed up the streaming room a little bit more again. We are now streaming from one computer, and we can play the game on another computer, and hopefully it won't cause things to blow up. Today we're not playing the game. Today we're just chatting. But I'm glad we have sound. And then, of course, XSplit needed more authentication. So basically everything that you can imagine going wrong happened. But it is nice to see everybody here. And hello, it's been a little bit since I've done a Driftwood Tavern stream. Just quick shout out to the community members that we've been collaborating with for our streams. They have been fantastic. We have been enjoying them thoroughly. They've been great opportunities. We will continue to do more, but we also still want to do Driftwood Taverns and have some of our own streams at the same time as well. Thirsty. So before we go into deep, let's introduce ourselves a little bit. You can go first. My guest.
I'm Robert, and I do systems design work here, and I tend to also like to do a lot of PvP stuff. So that seems to be where my focus is currently being directed.
Cool. I am Julia, or Nidicris, the community manager for Neverwinter, for those of you who are not familiar with me. Erg. Sorry. I'm saying the erg, so you know. Yes, today we are focusing on PvP. So I know that there is a lot of questions regarding the game in general, and we always get a lot of off topic. We are going to try our hardest to focus on just the PvP center questions. I'm sure some of you will get very creative to see how you can force something to be PvP. But the reason we wanted to do a PvP stream is because we are in the process of doing a CDP for PvP. It'll end. It officially ends tomorrow, but we've been pretty kind of flexible with adjusting end dates as needed by the topic. But the CDP this past week has been 2 topics concurrently. One is a CDP on CDP, which got a lot of opinions. I'm still filtering through that one. There's a lot in there to digest. And then we also had a PvP one, just because we know that even if they're a small group of our players, they're very invested in PvP. And even those who don't play PvP actively still has some great feedback to give, which is great. We wanted to see both sides. But we wanted to kind of spend some time, the first part of the stream, talking a little bit about what we saw in the CDP. I'm going to be talking to Robert about that, and then we'll move on to taking questions from chat. So to get started, before I get started though, a PSA. Please wash your hands for 20 seconds or more.
Multiple times a day. Do it more than once.
Yes, yeah. Just, increase hand washing. So one of the, I'm going to try to look at the camera, but also at you. This going to be that nice talk show host.
I'll just sit here and look pretty.
So you actually are the first dev outside of Chris and I who has been actively involved in a CDP, basically having ownership of a topic. So basically, I guess my first question is, how did that go?
I had a lot of fun with it. It was interesting getting to see a lot of different opinions. I tend to spend a lot of my time talking with the PvP focused people, and so I know a lot of their feedback already for PvP and sort of what they would like, and I can preach that to certain folk. But it was really interesting with this CDP, getting a chance to see some of the responses of people who don't necessarily play PvP all the time, and sort of what a more generalized community feedback about PvP was, because that's not something that I tend to see very often when browsing the subreddit or our forums or anything like that. So it was really interesting just getting to see a lot of range of feedback on the topic.
And for those of you curious, you can go to the forums if anybody can link. I believe if any of the mods are on, they can link to the forums, the PvP CDP. And also, Rainer wrote this really great spreadsheet summary collecting all the feedback. That's actually really fantastic, just because it's very helpful to us to then have it digested. We love it when the community is motivated enough to summarize and kind of condense information. So you can check that out. But yeah, I definitely noticed that we had people who are very invested in PvP, but we also had people who are like, you know what, I tried it once, wasn't my thing, and here's why. Maybe I would like to try it again, but only if these steps are taken.
Well, there's also a lot of concern about PvP taking resources away from PvE content, or just PvE in the way that it gets built. Certainly, I think the vast majority of our resources go towards PvE, and when we do make PvP changes, it's usually more of scalpel changes and big hatchet job sort of things. So I definitely understood where a lot of that concern came from when it came to a general community thought of don't take our resources from PvE and put it into PvP. Definitely, I don't think the way that we operate in general. Usually we try to identify areas where we think a change is really necessary, whether that's in PvE or PvP, and then apply whatever focus is necessary to make that happen. And sometimes, in my case, for season stuff, that was myself and another designer who was working on some of the rewards, Joe Leon. And it was just him and I as sort of a design element behind it, and some tech element that came behind that as well, to make the seasonal leaderboard work and everything. So it's not like we had 15 or 5 to 10 designers on it. It was, for the most part, just Joe and myself doing some rewards and making some config files work properly. And all in all, it was a pretty short job to do. But yeah, seeing the concern about how much resources might be taken from one to make the other happen was also really kind of eye-opening from the CDP.
Yeah, definitely just a lot of, because there's a lot of, one of the, I think, common topics was players wanting to find ways to kind of decouple PvP, PvE, because right now they're so very intertwined. And I know you and I have had discussions about the logistics of that. But yeah, definitely. So while we definitely value the input of those who don't play PvP, but this is a stream focused on PvP. We do want to make sure PvP players feel heard and appreciated and valued. So.
Well, and on top of that, PvP is known to be a smaller audience that we have right now. And so hearing the opinions of people who don't play PvP and what, I asked a question targeted hey, people who don't play PvP, what would it take to kind of get you through that door? What are your issues with it? Because in the grand scheme of things, PvP works best when matchmaking has a lot of people to sort of put into their little blocks. And so having more people in helps to make the games better. So it's at the same time you want to appeal to a group of people who it is a smaller group of people who are really dedicated to it, but then also to try to somehow get new people into that. And so seeing those opinions of those people who don't normally play is a good thing for us to be able to measure against, I suppose.
Yeah, agreed. So just to kind of talk a little bit more about the ideas or feedbacks from the CDP, are there any specifically that caught your attention? Like one that you kind of read it and then it kind of spent part of the day with you and you were molding it over?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest points of feedback that I saw from the subreddit was, or some subreddit, from the CDP. I'm going to do that a few times for sure. They both had that same sounding start.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely are trying to make it into more of a dialogue, which Reddit can become. So,
I think one of the thing that I think really jumped out at me a lot in the CDP was the amount of people who wanted to who were actually like getting into it, but then finding that like their characters were not, end game best in slot stuff, with like, rank 5 artifacts, best mount powers, best enhancement, max level on those things. How much those people wanted to be a part of it, but when they got in, they get stomped by people who are at that end game place where they're looking to have that sort of challenge. Seeing them and hearing sort of what they had to say about evening the playing field, and let me just say evening the playing field in terms of having. I think what that response is actually saying is that they don't want everyone to necessarily like devalue their investment into their character. I think what they want is a game where they can play with people at the same sort of investment level that they're in.
Okay.
And when it comes to that right there, I think that there's definitely room and some sort of means that we can. And this is something I'm kind of mulling over and taking in, but a way to satisfy both these end game PvPers with like I think a lot of the talk gets thrown around of like a ranked queue and like an unranked queue, and then trying to keep people in to rank in or to queue into the proper place that they're supposed to go into.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about that I found was really interesting, and I think has some merit to it. My main concerns, of course, behind that are with a small user base already, fracturing that into two separate groups of people who aren't quite ready for that end game stuff, and those end game players who want to play at a higher level. Those queues would then, as a result, pop a little less often. And so, again, getting more people into those queues happens to be a way to fix that. And so it's like getting new people in, getting that new blood in, finding a way that they will stick around and want to do things. So.
Yeah, and I think that was actually something that was expressed in the CP as well. People were like, it could water down the groups, the queues, if we try to separate them, or it could mean less people. But it's a very much chicken egg problem where they're so connected. Definitely saw that as well. I'm gonna check up on chat. We're not gonna officially take questions for a little bit longer, but great to see conversations. Just please remember to keep it civil. This is a PvP stream, but not a stream where you're PvPing with each other on the chat. Please.
There's no rewards for it, so it's not worth it.
It's not rewarding when there's chat PvP. So one of the things is, I know that I kind of asked, you were reading the questions over and you kind of laughed at this one, but I asked if there are any low-hanging fruits, and for those wondering that, basically any ideas that came up in the CDP that would be a little bit quicker to implement versus some that take a longer development cycle, because as some of you know, PvP, the roadmap for Neverwinter we've been working on it very actively. We presented it. There's a lot of stuff happening. So 2020 is pretty scoped. But I'm always looking for things that maybe we can do and kind of insert mid-development versus the things that just are going to take a lot longer. So,
I think in terms of low-hanging fruit, especially when it comes to a big topic like this, I don't think that there's like a lot of like, we can just do this, and this, and that's going to have a really big change that's going to really influence a lot of stuff. In terms of low-hanging fruit, though, there are things like fixing crashes, fixing broken artifacts or mount powers that are skewing things and having a very negative effect on the gameplay experience of people there. Like, aware of the paladin sigil, the paladin or the OP sigil. That's when I've been wanting to take an axe to for a bit. Thoughts about doing a bunch of different things with those sigils.
System designers saying they want to take an axe to an item that always makes me nervous.
Yeah. Sure.
I'm also figuring like the scene in Lord of the Rings where Gimli tries to use his axe on the ring, and
that happens.
It is an OP sigil.
It is OP. There's stuff like that I think that there's low-hanging fruit in terms of where can we build some satisfaction and progress towards fixing this area, and that's certainly those are stuff like that are on that list. None of the like, oh, just make a new queue, or like make a new gameplay type. Like let's say like deathmatch. Let's say we really want to put deathmatch in the game. That's not a small thing to do. That's not definitely not a low hanging fruit. Even though it would be like, what if we just reuse the same map? What if we reuse some of our more time intensive things? There's still a lot of stuff that has to go into that.
So I did see some comments about like the crashes occurring, especially like on console and PS4 and Xbox, and we're very much working on those. We've actually already issued a few patches with some fixes for PS4, and then Xbox. The builds are going through certification. They have to be approved basically by our first-party platform partners, Microsoft and Sony. But we are very much aware of the crashes affecting people. On console especially, and we're working on them. We're trying to fix as many as possible. And then for PC folks who mentioned that Instance 3 of Avernus was really laggy, we're aware of that. I think we took action yesterday. So I don't want people to feel ignored, that we have an eye on those. So because as some people mentioned, it does impact the PvP season when they're crashing. So
yeah. And also to the concern that like when I say I'm going to take an axe to the Paladin sigil, we have ways, there are dark methodologies in place where we can make changes to something that affect only PvP and that affect only PvE. The hard part about having a lot of grand separate, if doing that a lot in a lot of different areas, it can be really problematic in terms of upkeep. If you don't have a lot of things that you separate a PvE and a PvP version of, it's a lot easier to just sort of maintain going forward. But if I was to do something with the OP sigil, where I needed to like really make that not as powerful in PvP, it's possible to do that. But then it's sort of also opening a Pandora's box in terms of like, well, you did it for this, why not for this, this, and this? And then that list exponentially grows, and it's a bit of a danger when that happens, because then you don't get to. It's a lot harder to make bigger changes than when you have a lot of other smaller dependencies that you have to maintain and track.
Yeah, and I mean we are also talking about an older game that has a lot of there's a lot of data for this game, and I know that sometimes we can get caught up in like say we're chasing a graphic issue, and we start with fixing one small area, but then are like, oh, well, we resolve that, and then we get feedback that the red marks or the dirt is also occurring here, and it's basically us then having to go, instead of being able to like AoE that problem, we actually have to go one by one, which it does take a lot of time. I'm not saying that's not important and we wouldn't do it. It's just also acknowledging that once we realize it's going to be a much bigger problem, then we have to scope for that, and that's when production makes us sad. So.
that's when not having a time machine makes you sad, or some ability just to make more hours in the day.
But I mean, I also think that for PvP, one of the things I saw in the CDP thread was there was that concern of like, we don't want PvE to get hurt because of changes in PvP, and we don't want PvP to always be subject or be hurt by PvE. So it's definitely, they are definitely linked. But I mean, I am glad that we do have ways to make items and or certain things just be PvP, like behave differently in PvP than it does in PvE. I think starting with that would make some things a bit better. But like you said, it does snowball from there.
Yeah, it can snowball a little out of control. I've worked on projects where that's happened and seen the result of that, and so I'm a little cautious of going down that route as opposed to just trying to figure out alternative solutions for those problematic artifacts.
So we'll start taking questions in like 3 minutes. There's a couple more topics I want to discuss, and then I do have some questions already pre-written that some folks passed on to me, and then we'll also be taking the chat ones as well. So if you've asked before I officially start taking them, you might have to retype them. But there was one other thing. There are actually two other topics that I wanted to bring up that were in the CDP thread. that one of them was a lot of people, which surprised me, were asking for a spectator mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know if you had any thoughts on the logistics of that, or what the benefits of that would be. So yeah, I was curious about that.
Spectator mode in like a private queue, I could definitely see the application for that, and the ability to make that happen. Because I think there's a sort of opting into it that you take when you're saying, oh, I want to spectate a game. The people that I'm spectating, I sort of want them. You want them to know that they're being spectated.
Spectator sounds like such a clinical word when you say it that way.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's spectating a public or just a solo queue game. I think there's definitely there's fun in that, most certainly, because you kind of get to see how other people are playing the game in a very natural setting.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem with that is figuring out how, like when a queue pops, do you wait for a queue to pop with a spectator? Now, obviously you can't do that because I don't think enough people would spectate in order to make those queues pop. And at the same time, do you let someone queue into a game that could be like half over at that point? So I think for like public games, I think there's a lot of ifs and ands and buts in there that make that a more difficult proposition. But I think for private games, where certainly there was the PvP tournament recently that was held, where if they were able to go into that private game with an observer position that someone could take, that would definitely, I think, have helped them out more and been more appealing for them to do stuff.
Yeah, shout out to Flounder for
Yes.
kind of broadcasting and streaming those matches, and all the folks involved. It was really great to see. We love to see players put together their own events. It's always great. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other kind of hot topic, which also surprised me, just because when I first started at Cryptic, solo queue was not something that was permanent. It was something that was brought out as like a weekend event, the solo queue for PvP, but then it became permanent. It was something that was requested quite often. And there was a lot of discussions between players about the usefulness of solo queue these days, if it's maybe negatives outweigh a positive now, and whether we should remove it or what. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on the solo queue and its utility and all that.
I think, like you, I wasn't here back when they made those changes to solo queue, and so I really didn't get a sense of what it was before it is what it is now. I do think it would be interesting to allow pre-made teams to fight pre-made teams, and to have that sort of outside of the private queue, where like, oh yeah, I challenge you sort of thing, but have more like, hey, my crew of 4 people. Or 5 people are willing to, queue into something that puts me against another team that's also of a, composition where it's people who play together. I like the idea of that. It's definitely interesting. Again, I think the reason I can see some of the way that they would have made those changes back then is probably due to the queues not popping frequently enough when you had. Well, queues not popping frequently enough, and people having bad experiences when they're not part of a team. And so this team of 5 people, or team of even like 3 or 4 people, get put into something with like some random person added in, some rando, and all of them go up against a team of just non-pre-made pubs. There's obviously a communication and experience differential there that's going to make that a bad experience for at least that for that whole other team, unless there's some real just shenanigans that go on in that match. So I like that solo queue is kind of an evening, it sort of evens that communication issue, or that communication potential imbalance. But I also want for those pre-made people who want to do tournaments, who want to do like, I want to go against your team or your group. I'd like to find some way to reward them for playing the game at that level and coordinating and investing in that level of just, this is what I like to do. So it's something that's definitely on my mind, especially after hearing reading the feedback from the CDP about how they felt towards that transition.
Yeah, cool. So we're going to start now looking at questions from chat. If you asked something earlier, if you don't mind repeating it, but please do not spam the chat.
And I've been kind of looking at chat, and there's been a lot of talk about, I know I brought up the whole sigil, which has spawned some talk about how effective healers are and things like that. Let's simmer down just a little bit. There's a lot of different experiences from a lot of different people at different skill levels, different item levels, different time spent in the game, experiences. And there's a lot of things that go into what could make something strong. And, I have no problem with that. And so just understand that there is a lot of different feelings about those things. And it's okay to have those different feelings. It's also a good idea to generally respect how other people feel about something.
Yeah.
And maintain your position if you feel your position is strong, but also to understand that there's going to be different ideas, and it's okay to have different ideas.
Yeah, and the spirit of the CDP was to get the different ideas in one thread. So, by the way, going forward, I've been talking to some of the collaborators, the community creators, and I will likely be moving to using the system that we used last time during the collaborative stream of the question bot through Discord. More information will be put out in the future as a way for us to better filter questions. But for now, I'm just going to be watching chat. And we had a question, which is, would low-hanging fruit be something like pulling the 2 Black Ice domination maps individually into the queue?
I mean, that's a couple line changes to make that happen, to my knowledge. However, are those maps good for PvP? Are those maps ones where if you solo queued and you ran into that map, would you be happy about that? And I can't say for certain that that's a large amount of people. And disconnecting from that map or just abandoning it, like, oh god, I'm getting into this thing. That's kind of why like the domination maps. That's why they are the solo queue experience, is because they're sort of like, what you're signing up for when you get into that solo queue. But yeah, we could, but I would definitely need some time to appraise whether or not those maps are actually healthy for PvP. To throw into a random, hey, I want to play PvP. Oh, I'm into this now.
I feel like I wouldn't want it to become one of those memes where it's a picture of whatever it says. They were so excited with the fact they didn't stop to think if they should. I don't want that to become a meme. Skull Elf asks, do you feel that having more than one player of a specific class in your group has any effect on the difficulty of the match? For example, I feel that having more than 2 rogues or 2 healers in the same group can be a game breaker if they play correctly, while if there are different classes, the match will be more balanced and fair. Is there anything you plan to do about this to make matches and groups more balanced?
That would definitely be an ideal, is not have... I've been in games, because I do play some PvP, not as much as some of the hardcore crowd here, most certainly, but I've definitely been in games where it's like, oh, there's 3 tanks and 2 healers on that team, like not even a DPS in sight. And like, I play a ranger, and that's not always a great feeling when that happens. I think the cause for when that does happen is usually a result of not enough people of a certain class are queuing to make all that work properly. And then there's also, even when there is, there could be some issue in terms of it's got the people for the game, but then it organizes them incorrectly. Definitely things that can happen. I will be talking with our
We're good. We have those.
We'll be talking with our tech priests to see what their thoughts are on
our tech priests. Wow,
that's a Warhammer thing. But
okay. I was like, wow, you brought in a term here.
Yeah, I'm talking with the people who are far smarter and way more talented than I am on whether or not the matchmaking system is functioning in a way that we think is the healthiest way, which would be trying to get ideally I would like to see like maybe 2 or 3 DPS or at least like 2 DPS, healer, tank, and then like a flex spot for whatever the queue is asking for or really needing. And I recognize that even that has potential problems in it, because then you could still get the 2 healer combo, and if they know what they're doing and they got the right gear, it can definitely be another really tough experience for that other team. So yeah, a lot of it is also like getting the amount of people to queue and have the matchmaking system actually, you know, oh, this is, you know, how good you are at PvP. We've got a lot of tanks who are really good at PvP and not a lot of DPS in right now, so that's when you get those sort of instances.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely something that I'll be talking to some folk about.
So Gwedry asks, what is the timeline for changes to PvP? How long does tiny stuff like OP sigil adjustment take? And how long does bigger change like accessibility or spectator take?
Changes to something like the sigil, those can be done relatively quickly depending on how good of a designer you are. I'm terrible. Don't depend on me. But like those changes,
you know, it's not very encouraging. You're doing the. Don't believe him. He's a really good designer.
That's very kind of you. But like that change is relatively quick if we know what the change is that we think is the healthiest change for that thing. Like, oh, it's like ranger buffs that are affecting the enemy team in PvP. Okay, that definitely shouldn't happen. We can get that fixed pretty quickly because it's like, all right, that's an obvious bug that happens right there. But like rebalancing something or making that separation is going to cause us to look at that item and have some deeper discussions about what to do with this sort of thing. And you'll have different people who come with different ideas, different focuses on it. And so finding that middle ground in there, that can take some time and effort, getting it implemented, tested, making sure the fix actually solves the problem that you started out with. That can take some time. Certainly not as much time as, like, I think implementing an observer mode or something like that into a private PvP match. But it can it definitely takes. I don't think we like to make big balance changes like that just willy-nilly. So it takes time. And
as Robert did point out, when we talk about the time it takes to work on something, it's not just the the time that it take the designer to go in and go into a line of code, for example. It's okay, I've touched that line of code. What else did it affect? We now have to do all the checks to see what else it affected, what it impacted.
Got to get QA to look it over. Just means you got to put it into the QA slot. And there's other things that they're doing. They're busy all the time. So.
And then it has to be put into a build, a PC build. If it's a console build, then it has to go through certification, which is... so there's basically a lot of administrative work. So when you ask how long does something take to develop versus something else, even the quick things take a while just because there's so many steps involved. So, let's see. More questions.
How do I feel about only having to click F to kill a player? I feel like that's pretty okay. I like the bit of the little stomp that happens. There's plenty of moments where, like, you see someone about to stomp you and they get knocked away or something like that, and there's that hero moment that happens. So I'm pretty okay with that. Press F and hope that you get it through, or take care of the problem elsewhere and just let that person bleed out.
It looks like we have Michael Lynch join in. Hi, boy. Michael. All the PvP pros. Yeah, maybe you can learn from them. Lynch is very competitive, so
when we have internal PvP stuff, he's decimated my ranger so many times.
Is he on his rogue or his warlock when we do?
Warlock. Just get that force choke on me, and I'm just like...
I love that power so much. Skull Elf asks, the rewards in public PvP matches are very bad, and I think this is one of the main reasons PvP is not very common. How do you feel about making glory more attractive? Gear vendors with better gear, since currently PvE gear is the best options to go with in PvP.
Yes, making rewards better is always, I think, a good way of getting more people excited about a piece of content or about an activity. I'd like to do more with the how you get rewarded and what those rewards mean, outside of the seasonal context. Like I think that I like the season. I like the season stuff. I want to make some changes to that store soon enough here. Just sort of breathe a little fresh life into it. But yeah, outside of the seasonal PvP rewards, I think getting some changes in for glory and how all that stuff functions, I think that'd be a good idea. A lot of it's just coming up with a plan that actually sounds good.
Yeah.
Paladin Sigil CDP.
No.
Let's do it.
Yes, we do want to. We do want to get granular on some of the CDPs. Some of them are pretty broad, but we have. I think it's T-Chef. From a non-PvP guide, answer: What would make you try PvP? The answer is wild PvP. As long as I could choose to get engaged or not. One of the reasons I tried PvP a bit in 2017 was the kind of display window wild PvP was in Icewind Dale maps. I still find fighting from time to time on Icewind Dale maps quite enjoyable if I see an opportunity. And the question: do you have plans to implement new limited areas of wild PvP in future modules?
Wild PvP. I can't say that I was ever around for any of those. I'll have to haunt some people about that around here to see what the actual how they feel about that.
I think it's the open areas PvP. But yeah, I don't think you were on the Neverwinter team when those were first implemented.
Not. I can't say I've experienced them either in my just normal playing of Neverwinter.
They do seem to come up from time to time, and I feel like the more
I like the concept.
Yeah, the more PvE players seem to bring that up, and I think it's something that allows them to get their PvP fix without having to go into an actual PvP match.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like the concept of it. I'll definitely do some investigating on it.
Let's see. I also have some questions from ahead of time. Yes, this was another topic. Kicking was a topic that came up. Are you planning on removing kicking and counter back if the answer is no? I love the questions they're given to me. Had the instructions on.
They already anticipate. They already anticipate what I'm about to say.
Why is it better for the game to keep it? And basically, there was another associated question, which is there anything in the works for changing kicking within PvP?
I've been having some talks with my lead about it for sure. I don't think it's a good idea to remove kicking, mainly because I've played other PvP games where you can't kick people, and what you get then is someone who just ints their way into either people leaving or not, or just like not being helpful in the slightest bit and doing their best to cause problems. I'll bring up like League of Legends as an example. League of Legends has the ability to FF at 15 when things just aren't going your way and you've got that person on your team who's just dead set on inting into the ground on it. But yeah, I think a kick is good because there needs to be a social repercussion for certain activities and behaviors. I think right now it is being inappropriately used, and I have been the victim of it a couple times. Not proud of that. Where my performance was not as stellar as it ought to be, and I've been kicked basically because I just didn't do very good, and they want to make room for someone who potentially is better. And I think when you have a really small group of people who are playing, the odds of you getting a really good person to fill that slot is higher than if there was a larger pool of players who are playing. So yeah, I think that it needs to stay because there has to be repercussion for certain behaviors. But we need to do something. I think definitely need to do something about how it's currently being used.
And it's not. I mean, these decisions are never easy when you have a feature that you definitely has like a core important benefit, which is the ability to remove people who are really doing something terrible. But then how does it not get abused?
Well, yeah, and I think the other aspect of it too also kind of ties back into something we brought up earlier. And I'm looking at the chat right now. I'm seeing a lot of get goods.
How do you get good if you keep getting kicked out?
Well, yeah, that's definitely the question to fire back with. However, if people who weren't at that level that you were in a different place, that means that the kick changes in terms of like, hey, maybe you don't belong in this like high end where all of us are in this game, and you need to be playing in a place where you kind of learn more of the mechanics and get better at the game before trying to get back into this. And that comes back to like, is a ranked queue and an unranked queue a good idea for that? Where like ranked players who want that sort of experience of like, I'm really good at this, they play ranked, and the people who are just trying to learn things, learn how their character functions, maybe earn some rewards that help them get into that ranked place is a good idea. So yeah, it's the issue of that kick happens as a result of trying to mash all of these players into one place.
I mean, I think actually something you brought up yesterday was that I hadn't even thought about when I was thinking of having the separate queues, ranked versus unranked, is there are PvP players who, one of the joys they get out of PvPing is to stomp everybody. Like they, you know, it's one of the ways of letting out aggression in a cathartic, you know, gentle way. But we were concerned that if we had an unranked queue, we would have high-end PvP players joining the unranked queue to kind of get that feeling of stomping. And so that did present a quagmire of like, well, how do we make it? How do we have an area where people who want to get good, people who want to learn, and people who, you know, don't want to be kicked because they're not performing at a certain level, and kind of keep it a place for them. So these are decisions, like these are things that you do have to think about realistically. And because our whole purpose is to try to, you know, get more PvP players, get more people involved in PvP, get more people to enjoy it, and then you have a bigger pool. So I wasn't sure really what was going with that, other than I just remember that stuck in my head from our conversation yesterday because I haven't thought about that. So
I do advocate keeping the kick, because there are behaviors that you need to, that I think a group of players can say like, oh man, we really don't appreciate this guy just dancing in the campfire, right? Like we kind of let's get this person out of here because of that. But using it as a means of trying to get a better player on your team, I am definitely against. I do not approve. What?
I like how Annie said, so maybe the better players should remember how bad they were at first and maybe help out.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean, there are those, and there are definitely players like in our community, which I really appreciate, that take the time to teach and guide and mentor folks in both PvE and PvP. So that's always appreciated. But there are others who just get in and say, you know what, I don't want to use my personal time to teach other people. They can learn on their own. I think both mentalities are fine to have, as long as you're not actively making the game a bad experience for other people.
Mm-hmm.
We got a few more questions. And I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier with someone who asked in chat, but they said, I had previously played a game that had open world PvP, which is the wild PvP. I understand you don't want complete open, but what if you chose to do so like with Icewind Dale in other areas? So they say in Dread Ring, and you would want to PvP, like with trading, you agree to PvP.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's so basically more support towards the idea of having open area PvP.
Well, that sounds a bit like wild PvP.
Yep, that's what I was.
Yeah. I like the idea of it. Some World of Warcraft back in the day, where that was a thing. I definitely think that if you opt into it, that's you opting into it. I don't want to see automatic opting into any PvP, because I don't think that, you know. I think as a franchise, even like Dungeons and Dragons, like it's a game about having this PvE experience, and we're trying to find ways to make PvP fun for all of those people. So yeah, it's if people are interested in doing it, and we you know, if you build it, they will come. It's kind of the mentality there. Hopefully, building those things isn't too labor intensive. But yeah, it's an idea I'm okay with, as long as it's like an opt-in thing, and the rewards for doing that can't be abused, because I've definitely seen that situation a few times.
Yeah. So Skyla Kara actually asked something that I wrote down, because I'm not sure if it's a bug, but or we just have to refine it, which is why are people matched up in queues with those they have blocked? This seems broken and should be fixed. Your thoughts on how to prevent this for players? So I don't know the inner workings of how matching works with the blocking, the social aspect, but I will follow up on that one. I don't know if you know.
I'm wildly unaware of that being a thing. That being said, definitely a good thing to follow up on.
Greyhouser said, what about kicking someone to prevent from climbing up the leaderboard? So yeah, I mean, that's
some of that degenerate behavior right there where it's like, I say degenerate because it is. Like, that's not helpful. It's not good for the player base. Nobody's happy as a result of that except for the people who are trying to impede others. But, like, you know, there's nothing I don't think I can do for that situation because it's hard. We can't parse whether a kick is a spiteful kick or whether a kick is like a legitimate, this person's dancing in the fountain. Usually the way that that's sort of circumvented is the people on your team don't kick you.
Yeah.
And that's all goes down to like very social reasons for that stuff. Short of disabling kicking, I don't think that there's much we can do about that. I've always walked with the implementation with the idea that do unto others, and if everyone's booting everybody to stop leaderboard ascension, then that's just going to make a terrible system for everybody involved, and definitely they shouldn't do that.
Eggs Blake just says, unless PvP gets a major overhaul and becomes more appealing to the majority of players, I think it's a waste of time to even bother with it. We don't think it's a waste of time, but that's also one of the, you do bring up a point, it needs to become more appealing to more people, and that's why we're doing stuff like this. The CDP PvP, we hadn't done a deep dive into PvP in I don't think we've ever actually done something as deep where we dedicate specifically to one topic. And we see how it can fit into development of the game. That our goal is to make it more appealing, to fix what needs to be fixed now, address the concerns from all sides, and then evolve, make it better, bigger. There was another question. We talked about leaderboards, and one of the things that you and I had discussed yesterday was that the decay rate in our leaderboards is maybe a bit slower than optimal. So I don't know, were you looking into changing the decay rate so that people couldn't play a minimal amount of matches and then just kind of squat on a position for a while or in a certain rank area?
I've talked with some tech people about our decay rate. They say it's working. It's probably not working at the efficiency, I think, of a short-term thing, like a short-term event, like our season, right? Like season lasts a certain period of time and then it's offline for a bit, and that period of time is relatively short. And so I think that our current decay rate for leaderboards, at least, because I think it's probably affecting all leaderboard activities, it's probably a little too slow or not harsh enough. I'm trying to figure out the best word to use for that one. But it could be more impactful, I think, especially if there's a lot of concern, which I do hear a lot of concern from like the top end PvPers where, hey, this guy sits here and doesn't play games. And certainly I've seen the leaderboard where it's like, oh, this person's played, 11 games and they're high on the leaderboard. And there's other people who have played like 40, 50 games who are sort of in that same range and struggling to sort of get beyond it. So...
Hello.
So I think that there's probably some sort of change that the decay rate could benefit from when looking purely at a seasonal PvP thing.
So we've got 4 minutes left, but I know some people were asking about what happens to the PvP CDP next. And yes, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to disturb you.
No problem.
So the next steps will be, and I'll write these out on the forums as well, is we'll want people to put in their top 3, like basically choose your top 3 feedback or suggestions that you saw on the thread. There's still time for people who want to come in and give more suggestions, but it was really useful to me to see the focus of the chat today. Definitely, I know there's definitely a lot more questions. The community members have approached me to see if they can do another stream on their end with PvP. That's something that I would have to talk to Robert about his schedule if he could accommodate it.
Sure, yeah, of course.
We are planning another collaborative stream later this month. I'm still working out the details of the folks there, so stay tuned for more information on that. But PvP is not a topic that we're not just going to close a chapter now and move forward. I mentioned this late last year when we were releasing M17 and we released the new arena, where it's like, this is an ongoing conversation. You'll see some movement for a little bit, then you'll see it quiet down, then more conversations, then more movement. And unfortunately, that's kind of how game development works in a way. You don't just do everything and then you're done with it. You do as much action as you can at that point that makes sense, then focus on something else, have more conversations, reevaluate, and then do more action. So my goal is to get PvP in a place where more people are participating, but it's also enjoyable to more people. So I don't know if you have any final thoughts that we didn't cover.
There's a lot we didn't cover.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I have papers of things that like, oh, it's really good things to talk about. But there's not enough hours in a day.
Well, so honestly, the other thing is I am trying to minimize, just for safety precautions, and again, wash your hands. For safety precautions, I am trying to minimize how much time people spend in one room together. Like, I'm trying to keep it to 1 hour, just, for people's just well-being, so they don't start feeling like, oh my God, I'm in this room and the room is getting filled with germs. We definitely, but it looks like we have more questions, more topics that you wanted to discuss, so we'll find other opportunities to talk about them because, I definitely want to give you more chance to go over some of the topics. But before we leave, we do have a giveaway, so I can't let Chris always have all the glory. Actually, so we're going to do some giveaways, and the other thing we're going to do is I want to see who is currently. All right. Gray, let me know, Gray Hester, let me know if you're going to be streaming on your own after this. Who do we want to raid? We'll see. Am I raiding Gray Hester or Dead Mano? So we'll stay tuned. We'll decide. But we're going to do some giveaways. I was just checking to see who was on right now. And I have a mystery bag. Yes, this is the Waterdeep coin that's a cool bag. But this is a bag of random minis that Wizards of the Coast sent me a couple years ago. They're just minis they had laying around the office. And they just sent me this bag full of them. So I'm just going to pick a winner, stick my hand, and see what you get. There's all types of different kinds of minis in here. So you get random mini giveaway.
Apparently people are really into sheep right now. I am trying to figure this out.
Those are one of the things that I'm not going to question. There are some things.
I might need to make something happen with that. Who knows?
There are some things that you don't want to know. All right. So, if you want a chance to win a couple of random minis from my bag of holding, please type in the word PvP. Letter P, the letter B, the letter P. PvP.
Sheep mount. What is this sheep mount thing? How am I not getting this?
Again, do you really want
Am I too old for this? Is that what this is? Old man Rob over here?
All right.
How do I enter? Just type in PvP.
Yep, just type in PvP in the chat.
All it takes.
Yep, I am using MooBot, so it will pull, it will draw a random winner from someone who posted the word PvP. And yes, it looks like we're going to be rating Grey Haster after this. So we'll be hosting them, and but please stay tuned. Go to their channel or watch on here. But we'll be rating Grey after this. All right. It's a Scottish thing. Bah. All right. We're going to draw a winner. And Hunsicker 4. All right, Hunsicker 4. You want to... Let's see what you get in there.
That was a late entry from him, too.
Yeah.
Hold on. Trying to find something that isn't in pieces.
What did I get? Here's one.
Okay.
Ooh. The bottom should tell you what it is. And
it's an Empyrean? This homeboy right here
And then
with the wobbly warhammer.
and then you also get a tiefling warlock? Tiefling rogue. Yeah, I should have known with a dagger. So you get a big mini, and then you also get
It's not a sheep.
Tridrone.
Act it.
Tridrone. So go ahead and email community@crypticstudios.com because I'm going to need your mailing address. But yeah, you just get random minis, and I hope you use them for some kind of tabletop adventure or sheep. I don't know. But yes, so folks, stay tuned. We're going to head out. But thank you so much, everybody who joined in.
Yeah.
It was really great to get everyone's perspective. A lot of good conversations. We're not done yet, though.
Yeah.
PvP is something that it really does matter. So stay tuned for more info. Check out the CDP thread for see what happens next. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great one. Using it as a computer. I'm going to extend the goodbye. Bye-bye.